So you wouldn't know it with the weather outside right now, but I know that fall is just around the corner, so as a way to sort of get myself into the spooky season spirit, I've decided I'm going to be making some fall-themed amigurumi plushes. And I thought I'd start with a piece of harvest corn. So here's my quick tutorial on how to make this little cutie for yourself, so follow along. Alright, so let's get started on making our corn. So I'm going to begin with this yellow color for the main body of the corn. And I'm going to tie myself a magic loop. So I'll make myself a little bit of a finger guns here. Pinch that against. Wrap around the top digit. Flip over and cross. Wrap around my bottom digit. Flip over and cinch. Then I will grab the bottom loop and pull it up through my top loop. Flip my hand over and pinch both of those loops. Then I'll slide my fingers out, tension my yarn, and pull through to lock my magic loop in place. Then I'm going to untangle my tail, and I'm ready to get started on my first round, which is going to be to put 6 single crochet stitches inside of our magic loop. I'm going to go ahead and mark my first stitch as well. Alright, so when you have all 6 of your stitches, you can do the magic part of your magic loop by pulling that tail. And we are ready to move on to our second round. Okay, so for round 2, we're going to put an increase in each stitch. So an increase is when we're going to put 2 single crochet stitches in the same place. So I took my stitch marker out, and we're going to go through front to back underneath both of those loops of our stitch. And we'll place our first single crochet. Of course, put our stitch marker back in our first stitch. And then to finish our increase, we'll stick another crochet stitch, a single crochet, in that same place. And then we'll repeat that all the way around until we have 12 stitches total. Alright, so I like to get rid of my magic loop tail at this point in my work, so I'm going to give it one final pull to tighten up the center of my work. And then I'll grab myself my scissors, and I'm going to cut that tail short but not completely off, because it's going to go inside of our piece, but I like it to be short so it doesn't bother me while I'm working around. Alright, so we're ready to move on to our next round. Alright, so for our next round, we're going to just place 1 single crochet stitch in every stitch all the way around. So here's my first. Alright, that wraps up that round for me. Alright, so for our next round, we're going to continue increasing by placing 1 single crochet stitch in the first stitch of the round. And then we'll follow that with an increase. And we're going to continue that sequence of 1 single crochet, increase, until we get to the other side of our stitch marker. Alright, that wraps up that round for me. Next up, we're going to just put 1 single crochet stitch in each stitch all the way around. So there's my first stitch. Alright, that wraps up that round for me. For our next round, we're going to continue increasing by placing 1 single crochet stitch in the first and second stitch of the round. And then we're going to follow that with an increase. And then we're going to repeat that same sequence of 1 single crochet, 1 single crochet, increase, all the way around. Alright, that wraps up that round for me. Okay, so for the next 7 rounds, all we need to do is place 1 single crochet stitch in every stitch all the way around. So I will catch you back here once I get close to finishing that last round. Alright, so I am wrapping up that last round of just single crochet stitches, and I am ready to start decreasing. So to do that, I'm going to place one single crochet stitch in the first and second stitches of this round. And then I like to do my decreases by single crocheting 2 stitches together. I think it is an overall cleaner look, and I think a lot of crocheters do the same thing. But the way we'll do that, we'll go through our next stitch and draw up a loop, and then we'll repeat that in the stitch after. And then we'll yarn over and draw through all 3 of those loops. And that takes 2 stitches and brings it down to 1. So we're going to repeat that sequence of making 1 single crochet, 1 single crochet, and then decreasing all the way around this round. Alright, that's that round done. For our next round, we're going to continue decreasing by placing 1 single crochet stitch in our first stitch of the round, followed by a decrease, and then that sequence will repeat all the way around. Alright, that's that round done. Alright, so before we stuff and then do our final round of decreases on the corn's body, we need to put the safety eyes in and embroider his smile. So we'll take our hook, draw our last loop up long so it doesn't come undone while we're working. And then I like to place the face on the opposite side of my active stitch, so I'm going to flip my corn over. And then I'm using 8mm safety eyes that you can see here, but feel free to experiment with different sizes and different styles so your corn looks exactly the way that you'd like it to look. So we're going to place the eyes between rounds 10 and 11. So we can use the safety eye stem to count down to the right spot. So we can count together. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So this is round 10. It's going to go in the space between round 10 and 11. So there's my first safety eye added, and I'm going to add my second eye on this side because I want to stay away from the active stitch that I have. So the second eye is going to go 3 stitches apart from this eye here. So 1, 2, 3, and then in that 4th stitch, I'll push the eye through. So feel free to experiment with the placement of the eyes too. You may like the eyes to be a little higher up on your corn. I like them down here. I think it's kind of cute. So once you have your eyes in the fabric of your work, you can take the backs and snap them on the inside. I'll go ahead and do that now. Alright, and then next up we need to sew the mouth on. So in the past I've stuffed and then sewn the mouth, but I find I actually have an easier time sewing just inside of the work and not in the fluff. So I'm going to go ahead and take my black embroidery floss, and I'm going to thread it through the eye of my sewing needle. And then I'm going to tie a knot at the end by holding the tail against my needle and wrapping quite a bit counterclockwise. Then when I have all those wraps, I'm going to slide them down over the eye of the needle. And then keep pulling until I have a knot tied. Then I'm going to sew up in between the eyes, directly centered, and I'm going to make the right middle part of his mouth first. So I'll sew down, then I'm going to form the left outside part of his mouth by sewing back up. And then back down, sort of at an angle. Then I'll sew the left inside part of his mouth by going up through the same stitch that the right inside part is in. And I'll connect that to the bottom of the left outside part by going down through that same stitch. And then I'll finish by making the right outside part by going up through the bottom part of the right inside part. So I'm going to go up through that same stitch. And then to get this side to be right in line, I'm going to stretch my yarn first so I can see whereabouts I need to put my needle through. So I want to go through here. And I'll go down. And that completes the mouth, so I can flip my piece inside out a little bit. And I'm going to tie a knot inside to secure by picking up just a little bit of the fabric of the corn's body on the inside. And then I made my loop, my embroidery floss into a loop. I'm going to sew up through the center of that loop to tie a knot. Once you've got that tied, you can cut your embroidery floss short, but you don't have to cut it all the way off because we're going to hide it on the inside of our corn. Alright, we are ready to stuff our corn now, so we can take a little bit of our fluff. And I find it's best to not overstuff the corn and to really make sure you send plenty of fluff up to that top part of him. I also find he looks kind of cute if you take your fingers and sort of stretch the bottom part of him like this. Add a little more fluff to what we just did. Alright, so that is the face details done. Let's keep working around and finish off the corn. So before we made the face details, we took our hook and we pulled our loop long. So to finish off, we're going to have to reinsert our hook and pull that tail long down to tighten. And then we're going to finish by decreasing in every stitch all the way around to close off the corn. So there's my first stitch. I'm going to mark it and I will keep decreasing. Alright, so I have decreased in every stitch and I'm ready to fasten off. So to start that, I will take my stitch marker out. And then I'm going to slip stitch into the stitch that marker was marking. So I'm just going to go front to back through, and then I will yarn over and I'm going to pull through both the fabric, and then I'm going to keep pulling that loop until I've pulled through everything on my hook. Then we can continue fastening off by cutting ourselves maybe a 4 or 5 inch tail, because we only need a little bit to sew through these remaining stitches. So I'm going to pull that last loop out and tighten it down by tugging. And then I'm going to take that tail I just cut and I'm going to thread it through the eye of one of my tapestry needles. And then we'll take that tapestry needle and we're going to sew through each of these remaining 6 stitches to close up the hole at the bottom of our work. So we're going to go to the one directly to the left of our slip knot, as if we were continuing to crochet. And we'll go underneath both of the loops of the stitch, just like if we were crocheting. And we're going to repeat that on all 6 of those stitches. Once you've sewn through all 6, you can pull to cinch the bottom of your corn closed. And then we are ready to fasten off by tying a knot. So I loop my yarn over the surface of my work, and then I grab a little of the fabric of the work and then sew up through that loop. And then with my thumb I hold that loop in place while I pull, and that ties a knot really close to the surface of our work. Then we're going to weave the tail in and pull that knot inside of our piece by sewing really close to the knot down and in, and then up through just anywhere in the body. If you watch, that'll pull the knot inside of our piece. And I'm going to continue weaving this tail in by just sewing through a couple more random places inside of the corn's body. Alright, so once that tail is woven in, we can take our scissors and by pulling that tail tight and snipping really close to the fabric of the body, it will pull the tail inside. Alright, so that is our corn done. Let's move on to the leaves. Alright, so for our leaves, I'm going to be working in this light green color. And we need to start off with a slip knot. So I'm going to tie mine by looping my thread over on top of itself. And then with this tail, I'm going to bring it through that loop that I just tied. I like tying this kind of slip knot for the leaves because it's the kind that tightens when you pull the tail and not when you pull the working yarn. Alright, so once you have that slip knot tied, we're going to chain 6 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this lead is worked by working down one side of the chain, and then in that slip knot we tied, we'll work multiple stitches to flip us around and then work back up the other side of the chain. So we'll start in the second chain from our hook. So not this one, but this one here. We're going to make one slip knot, one slip stitch. Then in our next chain, we're going to put one single crochet. In the next chain, we're going to put one half double crochet. So we'll yarn over, go through our next chain, pull up a loop, then yarn over and pull through all 3. In the next chain, we're going to work 2 stitches. We'll start with one half double crochet, and we'll follow it with one double crochet in that same space. So we're going to yarn over, go front to back, draw up a loop, yarn over and draw through 2, yarn over and draw through 2. And then inside of the slip knot that we tied, we're going to place 6 double crochet, 3 on this side, and then we'll flip around and put 3 on the other side. So here's my first. So there's my first 3 double crochet. So I'm going to pull my slip knot tail a little tight, and then I'm going to flip my leaf so that I can start working in this side of the chain. I also like to work my slip knot tail in underneath these double crochet stitches. You don't need to do this, but if you want to, it's a good idea to start working it in now. So I'm going to yarn over, and I'm going to go through the other side of my chain and underneath my slip knot tail. And I'll make my first double crochet on this side. You can see it's already started to swing around a little bit. We'll make another one here. And then I'll place my last one. I'm going to give that slip knot tail another tug to close off that loop there. And then I need to work my way back up the other side of my chain. And I'll do that by reversing everything I did on this side. So we're going to put 2 stitches inside of our next stitch, and we'll start with a double crochet this time around. Then in that same stitch, we're going to put a half double crochet. In our next chain, we'll place a half double crochet. I'm still working my tail in too, so if you're working your tail in, continue working it in. After that, we're going to put 1 single crochet, and then we're going to slip stitch here in this last chain. Alright, so to finish off our leaf, we need to add the point and then the vein, which will also help us link all of our leaves together. So to finish off, we're going to put one single crochet, but we need to go through a couple of special loops to do that. So we need to go through the front loop of the slip stitch that we made. So I'm going to put that one on my hook. And then we're going to go through the loop of the chain we used to turn. So remember when we worked through the second chain? We're going to grab that first chain. So let me go again nice and slow so you can really see. We'll go through that front loop of the slip stitch that we made and through the chain that we made to turn. And then we're going to work a single crochet just as we normally would by yarning over and drawing through, and then yarning over and drawing through both. So that gives us a nice pointy leaf. And then we're going to slip stitch down the center of the chain that we just worked our leaf on. So to do that, we're going to turn our leaf and we're going to place our first slip stitch through the center of the chain that our slip stitches go through. So there's my first slip stitch. You can see it already sort of turns me working the right way. I'm going to keep slip stitching in the centers of each of those chains that I made. So there's the 5 chains. So for the next 2 slip stitches, we're going to be working inside of these double crochet stitches. The first slip stitch you're going to make is going to be between the 3 on the right and the 3 on the left side. So we're just going to go right in between where those stitches are. So just stick your hook straight between the gaps between those double crochets and slip stitch. And then we're going to grab the double crochet that is right above where we are here. Sometimes it may be the 3rd on the right side, sometimes it may be the 1st on the left side. It doesn't really necessarily matter as long as it's the one that seems like it's the most centered on our leaf. So we'll go from front to back through both of the sides of that stitch and then slip stitch just like normal. And that wraps up our first leaf. But our corn is going to take 3 of these, and I don't very much care for sewing. If you've watched any of my videos, you've probably figured that out. So I like to make them all in one piece. So to do that, we're going to chain 3 stitches off of our leaf. And then we're going to start a second leaf the exact same way we did whenever we began our first. So we'll chain 6 more stitches. If you want to, you can mark that 3rd chain because we're not going to be working in this chain. We're starting fresh here. So I'll go ahead and mark that so you can see visually what's happening here. So we're going to chain another 6. So I've done my first 3, 2, 3. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I'm going to start my second leaf working in those 6 that we've just chained. So that's exactly the same as the first leaf. In that second chain from our hook, we're going to slip stitch, then single crochet, then half double crochet, then half double and double crochet in the same stitch. And then in that very last chain, so the 6 that we made, we're going to do the same thing we did when we double crocheted. We'll do 3 on one side and then 3 on the other. So here's my first 3. Then when you have those first 3, we'll flip around and we're going to have that chain be behind our work. Then we'll make 3 double crochet stitches on the other side, just like our first leaf. I'm going to take that marker out now. Then we'll work up the other side of the leaf just like we did on our first one. So we'll put 1 double crochet stitch and 1 half double crochet stitch in our next chain. Follow that with a half double crochet, then a single crochet, then a slip stitch. Then to make our leaves point, once again we're going to go through the front loop of our first slip stitch and through that chain that we made to turn. You can see it there. And then we'll make a single crochet. Then we'll work back down the center of our leaf, just like we did before, by slip stitching through the centers of those chains. So there's the 5 chain, then through the center of that double crochet cluster, and then through the double crochet stitch that's closest to the center of the bottom of the leaf. Quick note, you may accidentally catch some of the stitches of the chains between the leaves. If you feel like your hook accidentally went through some of those chains, just undo your stitches. We want to keep those chains loose because we're going to be able to move the leaves and pose them how we want on our corn. Alright, so we've got 1 more leaf to go, and we're going to do it the exact same way we did our second leaf. We'll start by chaining 3 stitches, and that's like the connector between the leaves. Then once we have those 3 connector chains made, we're going to chain 6. Feel free to mark that first chain that you make as a part of the 6 that we're doing here. And then we're going to work this 3rd leaf just like the 2nd and the 1st leaves. Alright, so that's my 3rd leaf complete. So we're going to arrange the leaves so that they make a little bit of a triangle here. So we're going to slip stitch through the first chain that we made at the bottom of our first leaf to connect our leaves together. So we're just going to go through that chain stitch here, and we'll slip stitch to connect our leaves together. And then we need to make the stem at the bottom of our leaves. So first double check when you've connected your leaves, you want the veins to all be facing the same way. If you look, this one here is facing the wrong way, so I'm going to take my slip stitch out. Let me correct that really fast. So when you can see all 3 veins on the leaves, you can go back through that same chain and slip stitch. Alright, that's the problem fixed. Then we need to make the stem on our leaf. So to do that, we're going to be chaining and then slip stitching back down that chain. So I find it's easier to hold all of my leaves sort of pinched together. Let me grab my working yarn here. So you sort of pinch them kind of in a cluster. We can chain. We'll do 1, 2, 3, 4 chains. And then we're going to slip stitch back down this chain to make the stem for our corn. So just like before, we'll slip stitch in the 2nd chain from our hook, in the 3rd chain, and the 4th chain. Alright, so to fasten off, make sure all your leaves are arranged correctly before you fasten off. We'll do that by slip stitching in the 2nd chain coming off of our 1st leaf. So I'm just going to slip stitch through there. I am ready to fasten off, and we need to leave a long tail because we're going to use it to sew this to our corn. Just cut yourself maybe 9 inches and then pull. And then you can tighten up. And if you weaved in your slip knot tail, you can cut it here. If you didn't weave it in as you worked, you'll want to weave it in now with a tapestry needle. Alright, so that is our corn's leaves and stem. So we're ready to attach. So to attach our leaves to our corn, before we even begin positioning the corn onto the leaves, I'm going to just go ahead and thread my tapestry needle. So thread it with that green stem tail that we cut. And then the way our leaves sort of arrange themselves is that we have that cluster of 3 and then that stem sort of in the middle. And I like this space here to be at the front of my corn. So I'm going to arrange it so that the leaves sit on the bottom part of his body. I'm going to take a quick peek to see. I like how that looks. So I'm going to take some straight pins and I will pin the leaves here to his body before I start sewing. Alright, so we've already threaded our tapestry needle. We're ready to start sewing. I'm going to start by sewing just straight into the corn to help secure the tail. And then I'm going to come up through the leaf over here on the left side. So be careful not to wrap that around the stem. So the stem's now tacked down. Depending on what you want to use your corn for, if it's a decoration or if you're going to be maybe having someone to play with it, you might want to tack the leaves down more or less. I'm going to be using this as a keychain, so I'm going to tack the leaves down quite a bit. So I'm just going to sew through the outside. I'm going to go about halfway up each leaf because I want the ends of them to stay away from the body. Then once I've gone up, I'm going to sew in and then inside the body and up and over to the other side. And then I'm going to sew, just like I did on this side, I'm going to sew down. And then I like to connect my leaves together. So I'm just going to sew through this bottom stitch of the leaf to tack it to the first leaf that I've attached already. Then I can repeat that same process, going up and then over and down and tacking until I've gone all the way around. Alright, I have worked my way all the way around and attached my leaves to my corn's body. So if you want, you can also tack these leaves together, but I actually kind of like the opening here at the front. I think it looks really nice. So I'm just going to go ahead and tie a knot and then weave my tail in. And that's the tail woven in, and your corn can be done here, but I have one more step that I want to do to my corn. Great, so I have one step left for my corn, and I'm going to add some rosy cheeks to my corn. So I'm going to take just my normal blush that I would normally use on myself, and I'm going to add just a little bit of a rosy cheek here on the outside of my corn's eyes. I'll put a little more on this side here too. And my advice on putting blush on is start with just a little, because it is easy to add more, but it is darn near impossible to take off too much. Alright, so my corn now has rosy cheeks, and he is complete.
Like always, thank you so much for watching this video tutorial. I'd love it if you'd maybe give my channel a follow. I've got lots of things that I'd like to share. Thanks!